minds of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, July 8, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Brad Onishi, writer, co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast, founder of Axis Mundi Media, and author of Preparing for War, the Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. Also on the program today, this week is week 0 for the fate of Biden's candidacy as he hangs on white knuckle. Meanwhile, across the pond, as they say, French shocker, left rallies to block the fascists. Labour wins in the UK. And a reformist candidate wins the Iranian presidential election. Lancet report the death toll in Gaza will be closer to 190,000. As Hamas concedes, Israel can wage indefinite war for a brief ceasefire. Meanwhile, Trump claims no knowledge of Project 2025. Meanwhile, Republicans may remove a national abortion ban from their platform for the first time in 40 years. Chevron ruling takes another victim. Bush judge finds the Biden administration can't enforce an anti-trans discrimination protections for health care. Job growth remains solid. Boeing cops a plea deal in criminal fraud case over the 737 MAX crashes. And rest in peace, Jane McAlevey at age 59. Yeah, I know we got a problem with the audio, folks. I don't know what's going on.
Better now, Sam. Better now.
So should I redo the start of the show?
I don't think it was
that bad.
No.
How are you?
Okay. I don't know. If you guys say it was okay, it was okay.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How are you doing? Oh, it's
I'm fine.
Wait, we don't have you on the screen.
There we are.
Emma Vigeland, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I'm getting it's breaking up a little bit on my end too. The audio is not particularly great. Got that. Now I can't even find it.
It was the for some reason your input wasn't playing nice with the theme song again. I don't know why that started playing up again, but we figured it out. So.
And I can't get the. Oh, there it is. All right, how's that? Is that a little better? No. It's
yeah.
You're good.
It sounds good now. I think it sounds good now.
It's the volume on that. I think it's on the web browser is going both ways. I think is the problem.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All
right.
Let's
get into this. It's sorry, we got a lot of news. I don't know if people have been following this at all, but there's a lot of news out there today. We had 3 elections since the 4th. I hope everyone had a happy 4th. I hope you enjoyed the Rick Perlstein interview, and also a walk down memory lane where it's September 2016. I guess it was September. I always remembered it as July, but it was September of 2016 when I was criticizing Jimmy Dore about his positions on the judiciary and his not taking seriously the implications of having a Republican president name new people to the federal judiciary. And we have more stories today. I mean, obviously not just a function of Dobbs, but in terms of the Chevron doctrine, I got a list of already 10 cases, maybe more. The biggest right now is the FTC no compete clause. There are others that the diminishment of the Chevron, I should say the reversal of the Chevron doctrine has impacted. We'll talk about that. On tomorrow, we're going to be talking to Daniel Nickanian about the French elections. On Wednesday, is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who are we speaking to on Wednesday?
Owen Jones.
Owen Jones.
Owen Jones will be here on Wednesday. On Thursday, we hope to have somebody to talk about the Iranian elections. And now let's talk about our elections, which people may not be aware of this. There is a presidential election going on right now. And the two candidates that we have that have a chance of winning are Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But you may have also been aware of Joe Biden's debate performance and what that did in terms of people's confidence that he is capable of running as a candidate. I mean, that really is what it comes down to. And on Friday night, I should say the Biden, I want to say administration, but it really feels like more like the Biden family right now, is desperately trying to prove to the Democratic Party that, in fact, he has not had a marked drop-off in his capabilities since the State of the Union, and that he is capable of being the candidate. Here is his interview with George Stephanopoulos. There was about 3 moments in it that I found problematic. This seems to be the one that I think people found the most problematic, was his answer to the question, what happens if you lose? Now, I want everybody just to take it in for a moment. So much of what we've talked about on this program has been about what happens if he loses.
The stakes.
The stakes, ladies and gentlemen. Here is how he answered that question.
And if you stay in and Trump is elected and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about. Look, George, think of it this way. You've heard me say this before. I think the United States and the world is at an inflection point. And the things that happen in the next several years are going to determine what the next 6, 7 decades look like. And who's going to be able to hold NATO together like me? Who's going to be able to be in a position where I'm able to keep the Pacific Basin in a position where we're at least checkmating China now? Who's going to do that? Who has that reach? Who knows all these? We're going to have, I guess, a good way to judge me is you're going to have now the NATO conference here in the United States next week. Come listen.
Okay, there's a couple of things here. Let's work from the end to the front. This week is a big NATO conference in this country. It has clearly been the Biden strategy to delay as much as possible a reckoning, get to this moment where he can prove that this is his foreign policy chops are so unique, so powerful that it is worth the risk for everything else that is involved in Donald Trump.
Yeah, but he doesn't seem to have a great assessment of the risk. There were other points in the interview where he repeatedly did not believe the statistics that George Stephanopoulos provided for him, both the fact that he is down in polling in all swing states and nationally. At this point in 2020, he was up many in the high single digits against Donald Trump, and that's part of how he won in 2020. He also did not believe his low approval rating. This is clear that he's struggling to cognitively, I think, understand the reality of the situation, which seems to be why Democrats are so concerned. And with that answer, look, I'm not a doctor, but he pretended that the stats weren't real, and he's undercutting everything that the Democrats are trying to portray accurately, the urgency of this election, abortion rights on the ballot, democracy on the ballot, by saying, hey, as long as I gave it my good old college try, things will be okay. No, they won't be okay.
Well, that is, I mean, okay. I don't know if that's a function of some type of cognitive disorder, but it is clearly the function of somebody who's lost the plot. Why? It's all speculation, but he's clearly lost the plot because, I mean, and I don't think there's a politician out there who doesn't think about things in terms of themselves. But a politician who is on top of their game knows you don't say that. I mean, that's the bottom line. You don't say the election that we have been running as an existential threat to the United States. If I lose, the first thing that comes to mind is I gave it the old college try. Even if you believe that, especially if you believe that, you don't say that. Because you're in a campaign and your response is, it would be a nightmare, George. And this would happen, that would happen, this would happen. And I understand that I would sit there and I would never be able to forgive myself because I owe it to this country. I mean, look, this is all like
layups.
This is layup. And so the bottom line is, and that, combined with the idea that he's sort of in denial about the numbers, like you say, and just sort of the nature of the interview, pre-recorded, all of that is, et cetera, et cetera. That is, that did nothing to provide confidence for people, and particularly, I guess, in the Democratic leadership. And 2 days later, Adam Schiff, who is a member of the leadership, fairly low in the totem pole, but is part of the congressional Democratic leadership, he seems to be the one to have been sent out to send the message. Here he is on
Meet the Press.
Meet the Press.
To have you here, I want to get your gut reaction to that interview on Friday night. Obviously, the president trying to turn the page. Based on what you saw, do you think he is still the strongest candidate to beat former President Trump?
Well, ultimately, this is a decision President Biden is going to have to make, and President Biden alone. But I would say this, he has been an extraordinary president. He has created millions and millions of jobs. He has expanded and strengthened our NATO alliances. He has brought back manufacturing in this country. He has brought about the most aggressive attack on climate change. He has done more in one term than most presidents ever do, no matter how many terms they get. And he's running against someone who's a pathological liar, someone who ran the country into the ground by his mishandling of a deadly pandemic, someone who is a pathological, not only a pathological liar, but is immoral, indecent, and unfit for office. But the performance on the debate stage, I think, rightfully raised questions among the American people about whether the president has the vigor to defeat Donald Trump. And this is an existential race. Given Joe Biden's incredible record, given Donald Trump's terrible record, he should be mopping the floor with Donald Trump. Joe Biden is running against a criminal. It should not be even close, and there's only one reason it is close, and that's the president's age. And what I would say, Kristen, what I would advise the president is seek out the opinions of people you trust. He's obviously talked to his family about this, and that's important. But he should seek out people with some distance and objectivity. He should seek out pollsters who are not his own pollsters. He should take a moment to make the best informed judgment. And if the judgment is run, then run hard and beat that SOB.
Congressman.
That is remarkable. I watched that live, obviously. That's all I do these days. But I just was like, hell yeah. Because, I mean, look, we were seeing this in France. I know it's not one-to-one, it's a parliamentary system, but it was actually extremely encouraging, the fact that a lot of these centrist candidates dropped out, and even the left in reverse, in order for, in the second round, the France to defeat the far right and stave off their victories. There was a bit of an alliance formed. And I do see all of these like centrists, whether it be Adam Schiff or Mark Warner in power, who are starting to raise the alarm about Biden. And it's purely self-interested in the sense of like now Virginia, which should not be in play at all, is apparently in play because of Biden's age. And so Mark Warner is going to be concerned about that as well. But this is an opportunity, I think, for leftists and centrists to come together and say that we should not be going into a general election with somebody who's down in basically every swing state, putting states like Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia in play when that was unthinkable months ago, and take a stand to stave off what could be a fascist red wave by Trump and the stakes of Project 2025, abortion, democracy. It couldn't be more clear.
The other thing that really comes across here, and there was reports of this last week, right? We had mentioned this. It is quite clear that the leadership in the House and the Senate is a little bit upset that Biden did not come to them and reassure them in the wake of the debate, but rather essentially got into bunker mode with his son,
Hunter,
and his wife. Now, look, he loves his son. That's great. I maybe Hunter has much better judgment than we have assessed.
He has a resume. He's consulted for Ukrainian gas companies.
I mean, but I think there's clearly for him to say, essentially, you're listening to your family. They're a little self-interested. Hunter in particular, I would imagine. You need to talk to people outside your circle and understand, understand what this is too. This is a message from Schiff, and not just Schiff, because there's no way this guy freelances. This is a message from the Democratic leadership. Look, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Mm-hmm. Don't make us all come out and call for you to step down. What we're watching right now is a huge game of chicken. Biden heard Schiff yesterday, and by say Biden, I mean the Biden, White House, and he released a letter basically saying, I'm in it forever. He also said during the Stephanopoulos thing that God Almighty had to come down and tell him, we will find out who amongst the Democratic leaders does or does not have a direct line from God Almighty himself. This is also that's also not a great answer in my estimation, although I guess maybe that's a little bit more politically savvy to claim that, you listen to God's will in this country. Appropriate, because we'll be talking to Brad Onishi in just a moment. But this is going to play out over the next couple of days. There was a small meeting of top Democratic House members yesterday, and apparently what came out of that was largely Biden's got to go. There's going to be a full caucus-wide meeting tomorrow amongst the House Democrats. There was supposed to be a similar meeting amongst Senate leaders. They canceled it because of privacy concerns, which seems to favor Biden on some level, right? Like if you're worried about leaks coming out of that, that means that some people who are afraid to talk about it, which means that they're afraid of getting Biden upset.
Yeah.
tomorrow there'll be a full Senate caucus meeting. We will know after that where this is going.
The problem is that as long as this goes on, the more we're not making the case about Donald Trump. And I think that the Pandora's box has been opened so that every time Biden steps out into the media at this point, there's going to be a conversation about his ability to speak extemporaneously, about the amount of time that he's campaigning, the rigor. It is a death by 1,000 cuts if we continue to go down this road with Biden. And I will just also make the case that, like, Democrats understand that this race is set up actually quite well for the Democrats in the way that there's actually a plausible path to a supermajority in 2026 when the map is more favorable for the Senate. And also because in Arizona and in Nevada, two of the most important swing states, and that's leaving aside Florida, Montana, Arkansas, I believe, where Democrats could overperform, abortion will be on the ballot.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a massive driver. And you know, Kamala Harris was making the rounds this weekend, and there's limitations for her, I think, as a speaker and as a candidate in some ways, but I think that she would be a much easier case for the American public, especially with abortion being on the ballot and maximizing female turnout as a narrative for the Democrats in the fall. And I think that's really the only option, because some sort of convoluted primary process, is that more democratic than the person who was elected as the VP for an 81-year-old being the candidate? I don't think that's the case. So I think it's Kamala, it's Biden, or bust at this point.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the sort of the ideas floating around on who would replace Biden, but I think you're absolutely right. This is an election that the Biden administration, the Biden campaign set out to make a referendum on Donald Trump. And the problem is now that Biden is the story.
Yep.
And that's not going to change. And the only way that it may get less of a raging story is if he has no further absolute showings of what we saw at the debate stage. And they clearly don't think that he's capable of doing much without that showing up, or they would have had him out there every single day last week.
I mean, Sam, to speak to his capabilities, these images from Axios, where they take a photograph of his walk to a podium and print it out with says walk to podium so he can see what it looks like before that. I mean, this guy can't do it.
Yeah. I think the rigors involved, frankly, in campaigning and being president versus the rigors involved in either campaigning or being president are dramatically different. I mean, both those tasks simultaneously, I think, are far more problematic. I'm not as worried about him, being the president for the next 5-6 months. But I don't think that he's able to do both, frankly, effectively. So we'll see. We're going to take a break in just a moment. And in a moment, we'll be talking to Brad Onishi, writer, co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast, author of Preparing for War, the Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. First, a couple words from our sponsors. Everybody knows the value of a good night's sleep. In fact, Joe Biden said that he didn't get a good night's sleep before the debate. You look better, you feel better, you perform better in live televised debates. The list goes on. You can elevate your sleep experience with Cozy Earth's innovative bedding products engineered to keep you cool even on sweltering summer nights. It has been incredibly hot in New York. I mean, also around the country, to be fair. But I have not had an operating air conditioner through this.
Oh, my goodness.
I've fans and whatnot. But the beauty is that Cozy Earth bedding is made out of viscose. It is made from bamboo. And in addition to it being incredibly sustainable, bamboo is literally a weed. It is bizarrely temperature regulating. I want to thank Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode. I want to thank them for my good night's sleep and unlock an exclusive 30% discount using the code Majority Report at cozyearth.com/Majority Report. You can get 30% off using the code Majority Report at cozyearth.com/Majority Report. I will say this also. Not only is the sheet's amazing, I've got a great pair of joggers and an amazing hoodie, which is my now go-to hoodie. It has the same sort of like softness. It's obviously thicker than a sheet, but it feels both like cool and warm simultaneously. I don't know really how else to describe this. And I just got a couple of new towels that are amazing. They're very fluffy and absorbent, and they look great. I mean, but fluffy and absorbent is what you want out of a towel. Bedding, like I say, superior softness. It has a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Cozy Earth products are designed to provide enduring comfort and peace of mind. Incorporating Cozy Earth into your self-care routine can enhance your sleep quality and overall wellness. Remember to go to cozyearth.com/Majority Report to get 30% off using the code Majority Report. And after placing your order, select podcast in the survey and then select Majority Report with Sam Seder in the drop-down menu that follows to let them know that we sent you. Put the link in the YouTube and podcast descriptions. Also, our favorite sponsor over at sunsetlakesebede.com are launching their newest product, Sebede Soft Gels. They're vegan. They are sugar-free soft gels that are designed to deliver long-lasting relaxation and relief. They're like gummies, but without, the sugar. They're just much more simple. You can take them with your morning vitamins, or you keep them bottle on your nightstand, or on your desk in the event that you're watching a debate that you don't want to be seeing. I mean, I took a lot of Sebede that night.
Sebede.
These are great, actually. It's a great way. It's a great delivery mechanism. It a little slower and more leveled out than the tinctures, but no sugar. They're vegan. And right now, folks, you can try Sunset Lake's new soft gels for 40% off. Use the code SG40 at checkout. The sale ends Tuesday night, July 10th at midnight. See sunsetlakesebede.com for terms and conditions. As always, you can get 20% off using the coupon code LEFTISBEST. But if you want these soft gels, you can get 40% off. It's a great way to try them. SG40 at checkout. SG40 at checkout. Check them out. All right, quick break. When we come back, Brad Onishi, author of Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. A pleasure to welcome to the program Brad Onishi, the writer, co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast, founder of Axis Mundi Media, a professor at the University of San Francisco, and author of his second book. Is it your second, I believe?
It is. Yeah.
Preparing for War, the extremist history of white Christian nationalism and what comes next. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I did not realize let's start with this. The idea of Christian nationalism, what's the because we've had a strong sort of extremist, if you will, or fundamentalist Christian presence in this country for decades, maybe a decade and a half, two decades now, almost, not decades, centuries. But when did it turn into a full-on Christian nationalist movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those questions where we could zero in on decades going back to the 1600s, the 1700s. I mean, we can really talk about the centuries of American and pre-American history, colonial history, and so on. For me, what's helpful is this: if we turn to the 1960s, we see great change in the country. We see a civil rights movement. We see the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, everything from Stonewall to the attempts to get the ERA passed. That's a moment when many conservative Christians in the country, especially many white conservative Christians in the country, don't see progress. They don't see the country living up to its promise to be a more perfect union. Instead, they see that as that's when we lost our country. That's when it was given to those who don't deserve it. That's when rights and representation were afforded to people who are not perhaps real Americans and should not be trusted with the country's destiny going forward.
And so where I didn't realize this, it sort of I guess ballooned into a movement in where you grew up. Let's talk a little bit first about your personal journey, because it gets interwoven here with the rise of this movement.
Sure. So I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up in Orange County. And I know that for most folks around the country, California, they picture California as a liberal bastion where we, the Democratic Party has a supermajority and so on and so forth, right? We teach our kids Das Kapital in kindergarten or something. The reality is it's a much more mixed political landscape. And Orange County in particular in the mid-20th century became what the Harvard historian Lisa McGurr called the epicenter of American conservatism. Orange County is a funny place. After World War II, it was the center, the central nervous system for the American defense industry. So in the decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, you have millions and millions and millions of Southerners and Midwesterners who migrate to places like Orange County. Now, they don't see themselves as transplants trying to figure out how to fit into a new place. They're implants. They're going to bring their culture, their life, and their religious ethos with them. And they're going to do so unmoored from all of the histories and the sedimentation of where they came from. In Pittsburgh, you might have Jewish neighborhoods. You might have large and historic Black neighborhoods. Well, in Anaheim, California, in 1965, you don't have any of that. So you see this sort of distilled form of white Christian conservatism take root in Orange County. And that's what I was born into and grew up in the 1980s. That's where I converted to evangelical Christianity as a teenager. I was ushered into a whole religious political landscape that to me at the time felt normal, but I realized later was really a kind of a central node in the development of what we now call white Christian nationalism. And if you do the history, you see it. You see that this is the region that gave birth to Richard Nixon, my hometown, Richard Nixon's hometown. This is the place that championed Barry Goldwater more than any other in Southern California and in California in general. This is the place that was really Ronald Reagan's spiritual home and named its airport after John Wayne. So, you start to look into it and you realize the deep roots of American conservatism, and somehow they unexpectedly take you back to Southern California.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a couple of actually interviews about the birth of conservatism, or at least the movement conservatism coming out of California. I mean, it ties in also to the medical profession. There was a lot happening in car dealerships. I mean, there's a lot of different narratives there. What I'm fascinated is the idea of this the distillation of for lack of a better, I keep calling it Christian nationalism, but was it Christian nationalism when it got there? Like the idea that this is a completely blank canvas. Yeah. California, very big country. A lot of people, the whole story about California for much of at least the first half of the 20th century was, we're going out there and I'm starting my life anew in many respects for various reasons that we saw, the Great Depression, but also because it's just so far away from their relatives, far away from legal problems, whatever it was. It's a blank canvas out there, but what was there Christian nationalist, Christian nationalist desires before it got there, or did things sort of coalesce there and become more concentrated and virulent?
Yeah. I mean, I think the answer is both and I think if we start with this idea that Christian nationalism in its essence is a fusion of the Christian and American identity, the idea that to be a Christian means to be an American, and to be an American, a real American, one needs to be a Christian, right? Those are just a basic working idea of Christian nationalism, that Americanism and Christian identity go together, and that if you separate them, you're left with something that for folks who adhere to this ideology and worldview feels incomplete. Now, folks who are migrating from Georgia, from Pennsylvania in the 50s and 60s, are they going there saying, you know what, I just wish I could be a virulent white Christian nationalist. It's time to get the family in the station wagon and head west? I don't think so. But my argument would be those places had long and deep histories, both religiously, ethnically, and politically, that were different from Southern California. So again, if I'm in Pittsburgh, I'm surrounded by neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, Jewish neighborhoods, Italian, Polish. I'm surrounded by Catholic folks and other folks, right? So this means that there's a check on my ability politically and religiously to sort of distill this pure white Christian nationalism into my community. There's just things getting in my way to do that. When you get to Southern California in the 1960s, 1970s, all of those things are not there. Those main streets, they're not there. You know what is there? Burgeoning mega churches, where folks are realizing, preachers are realizing, if I combine just vehement anti-communism with all these people who have jobs at defense industry plants, anti-communism, pro-capitalism, pro-individual, you know what that equals? The gospel of Jesus Christ. If I put all that together, now all of a sudden I get a religious and political set of elements that fuse into something that is not only, what I would call white Christian nationalist, but it's unchecked by all those foundational components on the main streets where these folks left. And that's why I think you're able to see this distillation, this petri dish of a conservative movement based on the idea that Christianity and America go together, form in this region of the country.
Well, I'm reminded of Zionism when you're talking a little bit. I mean, there's like this notion that we're migrating to this place. It's a fusion of national identity with religious identity, and one that ends up in a kind of militant right-wing ideology. It makes sense a little bit why Christian nationalists also are such virulent Zionists as well.
There certainly is. And there's this sense, and I think this is something that's important here about land and territory that plays into this. One of the things we're seeing out of some of the most, I think, disturbing strains of Christian nationalism right now is an emphasis on Volk and homeland. Those are words that are quotes from like very popular Christian nationalist manifestos that are being read by pastors and seminarians as we speak. So this emphasis on land and people, coupled with a story of Israel as a kind of chosen place, and America superimposed it's the Israelite story onto its own, you really do get a mix that leads to a Christian Zionism, past and present.
I want to move to your personal journey for a moment, and then broaden back out again. But before we do, which values come from where? In other words, like, it's a combination of Christianity and American national faith, but it's a specific vision of what America is based upon where these people are coming from. It's a very conservative, I think white supremacy based, patriarchal, like which part is American and which part is Christian? Like, I understand the way that they it's been fused, but was it always fused? Can we delineate which came from where?
I think we make a mistake if we get up in the morning and we think of the political realms and the religious realms as these, separate domains that sometimes interact. That sometimes there's this Venn diagram of religion overlapping with politics. I think it's more helpful to think of them as co-generative. One of the words that the religious right used back in the 70s and 80s, when it was the religious right and not Christian nationalism in terms of terminology, they would call themselves co-belligerents, right? That they were like stirring up and agitating together as political entrepreneurs and as pastors. And that's how I would think about it. I would think about it like if you take someone like Jerry Falwell, one of the progenitors of the religious right in the 1970s, what he's doing in the late 1970s is he's going around the country on a tour, but it's not a religious revival tour. It's called I Love America. He's holding rallies saying I love America, like there's a gospel choir. And at the end of those rallies, he has an altar call for America. And so I guess for me, the more helpful way to think about it is that for the majority of white Christians, they've never really cultivated a Christianity that has been separated from a sense of Americanism or nationalism. Now, at times, there have been forces that have tamped that down, that have unraveled it, that have put the jets, cooled the jets. But as we've seen in the last decade, there's also been times of deep cultivation and activation and, dare I say, acceleration. And so I don't think it's one influencing the other as much as two symbiotic elements growing together to reach what I think now is a pretty destructive force in American society.
I think it's difficult for like secular type people to conceive of it this way, almost in the same way. I mean, I make this argument about, misogynists and racists don't see themselves as holding two different, I'm a misogynist and a racist. It's no, I don't like people who are other than me and not conforming to my notion of hierarchy. But there was a time where there was a sensibility, at least amongst some cohort of fundamentalists, leave unto Caesar that which is of Caesar. We stay in our sacred world. We don't involve in the profane world. When did that? I mean, I know that Jerry Falwell was largely, and Paul Weyrich and these folks were largely responsible for bridging that divide. But was it hard for the congregation to join them, or was that because it feels like the system is set up in such a way that, like, unlike a more secular, a group of people, turning their direction in one way or another is like, is herding cats or changing a flight deck. But one of the advantages that I would imagine a Christian community has is the pastor stands up and says, that stuff that we were believing yesterday, I found out last night it was wrong. And so today, this is what we believe.
I think there's some of that at play. I think one of the ways to think about it, and I think the sociological data shows this, is whether it's the 1970s and Jerry Falwell, or whether it's 2020s and the MAGA movement and its fusion with white Christian nationalists. Christian nationalists are motivated to enter the political sphere in force when they feel their cultural identity is under threat. So let what Caesar's be unto Caesar is a lot easier when you feel like you're Caesar implicitly, right? Which means white Christians are the leaders in Congress and in the White House. They're the people on TV. They're the people who control what's going on culturally, economically. And again, why would I start my book in the 60s? Because that's a moment when you see all of a sudden a civil rights movement, a women's rights movement, a Stonewall that starts to threaten the white Christian and starts to make them feel as if they are under threat to be a minority in the country. But that has only accelerated over the last 50 years to the point where we got to 2016 and the election of Trump. And so I guess what I would say here is, how do you get those white Christians motivated to march, to rally, to protest at Planned Parenthood? You convince them that they're going to be replaced. You convince them that they're under threat. You convince them that the government hates God. Even though Joe Biden goes to mass like 3 times a day, you convince them that there's never been a Democrat who's ever been a religious person, and so on and so forth. And that sense of threat is a great motivator, whether it's in the 60s and 70s protesting the civil rights movement, whether it is protesting Obergefell, whether it's trying to put an abortion ban in place. It's all based on that sense of we will be replaced if we don't act, and we need to act now in order to save our country and ourselves.
And I'm fascinated by the usage of religious iconography and justifications and grafting that onto political realities, whether it be Southern California is Eden, or whether it be Donald Trump is sacrificing himself for our sins, and he's an imperfect vessel for our political goals. That is so I mean, if you could just explain that, as someone who grew up secular, the usage of those religious modes of thinking and applying it to politics.
We really see this at January 6th. A lot of so many of my colleagues, religion scholars, have done great work in addition to what we've done on our show to point out the deep and wide religious symbology at January 6th. Christian flags, Appeal to Heaven flags, Proud Boys wearing patches with the Psalms quoted on them, icons of Mary, statues of Jesus, prayer circles. Why? And I think the response with January 6th, and I think in general to your question, Emma, is that there's a sense when you invite people into a story that has a sense of transcendence, a cosmic significance, you're able to mobilize them in a way that perhaps you couldn't, without it. As Sam said, on the left, there's often this pluralistic and diverse coalition that has a hard time agreeing. Well, if you invite people into a cosmic story that says we have to act now, that Donald Trump is not just a candidate who maybe likes some of the policies you like, but he's been chosen by God to save this country from a woke globalist apocalypse. You're able to usher some folks into a movement and usher them in with urgency that you might not have without those religious or pious symbols. And so I think they have a really important function in these movements, past and present.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Democrats are trying to do a similar thing in terms of saying that he's an existential threat. It's a lot harder to do because we do not have a framework for any of it. And we don't have those, we don't have that natural cohesiveness. And that we don't have the sort of accoutrements, I guess, to maintain that. Is it, when these directives come down, how much of it is, who's the policeman? Is it God? I know it's even just, I know the act of sort of pulling these strains apart is conceptually not how it works. It's really just a way for us to understand. But how much of it is God, or is it, that the vehicle for God is my pastor, or is it the community? Mm-hmm. When I go to, to dinner, or I go to friend's house, where are the different forces of maintaining discipline?
Yeah. I think that one of the things that's helpful is to think about something like Christian nationalism as an identity and as living out a story. That if we do what my first year students do all the time and say, hey, religion's about belief, right? We're just going to learn about what Hindus believe and what Buddhists believe. We kind of get off track, because what it's really about is an identity that gives people a character to play. There's some data out there that shows us that there's many people who haven't been to church in a long time who will tell you in a survey that they think the federal government should declare this a Christian nation. That They believe our laws should be based on the Bible. And yet you say, that's great, Jeff. When's the last time you went to church? And they say, can't remember, maybe 2020, right? And so what that tells me is this is about an identity and a story to play. Well, then the question I think you're asking, Sam, is, well, how do I plug into that story, right? How do I plug in and play a part? And what we're finding increasingly is, yes, it's pastors and churches. They're important. But those pastors and churches are just part of a kind of a network of voices. And those voices are, across the media landscape. They're across the political landscape. So one of those is going to be Trump and his MAGA lieutenants. Others are going to be the Charlie Kirks and the Ben Shapiros and the others in the right-wing media. And so by the time somebody enters church on a Sunday, there's a really good chance they've had 8 or 10 podcasts, YouTube channels, other outlets, Fox News and Newsmax, that have informed their understanding not only of politics, but of religion. And so if their pastor doesn't confirm that, what we're finding is they often are just going to find a new pastor. So if you're a pastor in this day and age, even if you're not a hardcore MAGA person, you really have to make a choice. Do I get on board, save my job, probably get a couple hundred more people in the door on a Sunday? Or do I disagree, take a stand, and probably find myself without a job or a career and just kind of have to start over, even though I'm 48 and I've never done anything else? So I guess my point here is I think we need to see the cultivation of this discipline and this worldview as multifaceted, but it's all sort of disciplined by, are you on board with it as understood as a broad conservatism outlined by Trump and the elites at hand? And those come down to family, they come down to gender, they come down to immigration, they come down to sex, and those have been raised to the level of doctrine. Right.
It's fascinating, though, to me that and I get the idea that, okay, it's not just Charlie Kirk is more relevant to me than my pastor if I'm a Christian. It's Charlie Kirk and Fox and Friends and, Matt Walsh and whatever. I've watched all these. And so that's my sense of reality. That comes crashing up against what my pastor may say, but the pastor's supposed to have a more direct line. It's fascinating to me that the pastor has to bend. I mean, you see this all the time. You see this in all religions. I've known people who've been rabbis at big temples, and they're like, I couldn't handle it because. But part of it was certain ideological things in the past, and I imagine that happens. But it's not so much. It's usually one thing. It's fascinating to me that. So here's my question then for you: is how did you break out of it or fall out of it? I mean, it's less. It's more, it seems to me that's more of a question of how you drop out of it than you do drop into it.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I converted at 14 and I was a pastor by age 20 as a full-time minister.
Wait, why did you convert at age 14?
Well, I got invited to church by my girlfriend, and my thought was it's Wednesday night. And
now we understand.
So it's Wednesday night. There's no way mom's letting me out of the house. I've been getting in a lot of trouble. So if I tell her I'm going to church, she's going to say yes because she thinks that's going to straighten me out. My plan was find girlfriend once we get to church, sneak off into the field, make out, and then then church is a good deal for me. What happened was I had this incredibly extreme conversion. I met all these folks at the mega church that convinced me that God would forgive me and provide me eternal life, and that this was the answer to all my existential questions. And so I was the kind of kid by the time I was 15 or 16 that told my mom, I don't want Christmas presents. I want you to spend any money you're gonna spend on Bibles for people in Nepal or elsewhere because they've never heard of Jesus, right? So I really went from this kid in a non-religious setting to an extreme convert. I was completely devoted. So by the time I'm 20, I'm a minister and I'm married to my high school sweetheart, and I'm getting ready for seminary.
Is she the one that you went to the church with?
No, the one that invited me to church dumped me like very quickly after. I mean, she could tell I was choosing Jesus and not her. She right. saw the writing on the wall.
You
she
got
saw the
too
priorities.
into it, Brad.
Yeah, I blew it. Yeah. So she dumped me, but Jesus didn't. And so I stuck around. And so all that to say, I'm not somebody who just had some interaction with this culture. I was a foot soldier. I was a completely devoted disciple. The problem for me is my mind is way too active, and I started to read. I wanted to understand the ins and outs of our doctrine, of our history. I wanted to understand where we came from and how and why we got to where we were. And then things started happening like 9/11. And 9/11 happens. And in my church, this brings out Americanism in a way I'd never seen before. And it was not that I wasn't mourning and traumatized along with so many other Americans at what happened on 9/11. It was that it started to feel like our religion was more about the American flag than the cross that was in the front of the church. And so that was a moment of like, why did 9/11 lead to something like Iraq and Afghanistan and all of that? I remember wanting to vote for John Kerry and not George W. Bush the second time around. I told my elders at the church I was going to do that, and they said, that's cute. We're glad you think John Kerry's going to help people with education or healthcare, but he's for abortion, and that means he's a murderer. Do you want to be a murderer? And I was old enough by then, in my early 20s, to say, this can't be the only way. Like, we can't reduce the most fundamental questions of human life to like either or, can we? Like, there have to be theologians and mystics and philosophers who've done this in a way that's more complex. So instead of becoming a missionary like everyone wanted to, I went off to England to go to graduate school at Oxford. And when I got there, I was unmoored, just like many of those folks from Orange County before me. There was nothing holding me in place. I was able to read and think and really explore intellectually every avenue I wanted to go down. And I realized very quickly that the gospel I'd been converted into was a gospel as much about an American story than it was about Jesus Christ. And so that led me on a path of a much different kind of worldview.
Your story is both sort of like, is fascinating, but it's also, it's a little bit depressing.
Yeah.
In the sense that, your average person in any sector of life does not have that level of curiosity. Or, on some level, it sounds like your Christian nationalism was done in by your purity to Christianity, and combined with a curious intellect. That's not your average person in anywhere.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't suggest that there is an easy way out of this for a lot of people.
I think you're right, but I think here's where I take hope. I went back to Orange County just about a year ago to talk about my book, and I met with so many people I used to know at my former church, and they're not those that are at graduate school. These are folks who are just going to work and raising their kids, and so many of them said, "Hey, I'm so glad you wrote this book because I left 5 years ago. I left in 2016 after Trump. I left when George Floyd was murdered, and I saw the reactions to my church to that set of events." So I think there is hope in knowing that there are run-of-the-mill people out there who are saying to themselves, what I've learned about my Christianity doesn't line up with Trumpism or the xenophobia or racism or et cetera that I'm witnessing in my religious space. So I think one of the things that's easy to do is despair and think that Christian nationalism is this sort of majority force in this country. It's far from that in terms of numbers. And there are many who left after 2016. I think the problem is there's a lot more who are being seduced into it by way of patriarchy, xenophobia, and misogyny and nationalism to kind of reinforce some of the pews and those churches. So I think there is hope, but I think there's also reason to be incredibly fearful about what's ahead.
Well, give us some of those numbers, because I have to say, just because we like to do a little doom casting around here. I don't think you need a majority, frankly.
Of course not.
I think you need a very virulent small minority, and almost definitionally, we're talking about that type of sort of mentality. Like it doesn't take much of like people who are sort of really invested to make a big change in this country, and particularly in this era of minoritarian rule. So give us a sense of numbers, but also talk to me about, like, my sense was that Mike Pence was, prior to Mike Johnson, the most powerful theocrat, Christian nationalist that this country has ever had in terms of like an elected official. And that he served Trump in two different ways. One, to represent the establishment and at least the sort of the business community through the Koch brothers network that he was very, very heavily invested in and invested of, I guess. But also he was the one who delivered the evangelical Christian nationalist vote. Does Trump need him anymore? Like, how is that vote being delivered? Bush needed the marriage equality amendments in 2004 to win a majority. Trump needed Pence, it seems to me, to get to at least to win the electoral vote. What's going to fill that gap this time around for Trump? And give us a sense of numbers in terms of what we're talking about.
Sure. So we have, in 2016, we have just about 80% of white evangelicals vote for Donald Trump. We have about a majority of white Catholics. So that gives you a sense of the demographic. Now, in 2020, that goes up. So more white evangelicals voted for Trump by percentage, at least, in 2020. So,
but did the raw numbers of evangelicals who voted? I mean, I imagine, particularly at that time, I'm not surprised to hear that the percentage of those who voted did, but did the raw numbers of those people grow in the same, consistent with the increase in the percentages?
Yeah, the answer is complicated, but I think this is part of what we're seeing in 2024 is a shift on the part of Trump and many leading lights in the Christian nationalist movement. Dutch Sheets, Lance Wallnau, Charlie Kirk, they are really focused on Black, Latino, and Asian Christians because they feel like they've maxed out some of that white Christian vote. Like you can only get so much of that group. And those numbers are not necessarily growing. There's numbers out there that actually tell us that the numbers of white evangelicals in the country have gone down. What does that mean? It means there's no accident. You're seeing an increase. All these news stories, all the coverage of Black voters for Trump, of an increased Latino vote for Trump, of an increased Asian American vote for Trump. That's due to a strategic targeting of those folks. And how are they doing it? Well, they're offering a Christianity based on patriarchy, based on quote unquote family values, based on gender hierarchy, based on there's only two genders and so on. So the point I think here is 2024 is a moment where you're seeing them realize if we can peel off some of those people of color and Black voters, that's where we're gonna backfill, and that's where we're gonna perhaps increase our voter reach. So I think that's answer number one. I completely agree that you only need a minority. Like if you look at the numbers from Pew or PRRI, we're talking about 30 to 40% of the country score as Christian nationalists in some way. They appear on what we would call the Christian nationalist spectrum. My colleague Paul Jupe, however, at Denison University found in a recent study that about 9 to 10% of Americans believe only Christians should be citizens. He found that 14% of Americans believe that the church should have a veto on the government's policies. The thing about the groups we're talking about today, and I think, Sam, you already know this, and the audience probably already knows this, they vote in incredibly high numbers. Right? They don't stay home. These are not folks who are going to sit it out and protest. These are not folks who are going to say, I'm just don't think I'm going to be there this time. I have to run errands. I can't make it to the polls. These are people who vote in numbers that are well beyond the average American group. And so you only need a minority. Once you factor in gerrymandering, once you factor in voter suppression, you really do have a recipe where 30% of the country can dictate what happens for everybody.
What's the strategy? I mean, are you aware of what the strategy is or the tactics? Because I think like the idea that they talk about, Blacks for Trump, what they're really saying is specific Black Christians for Trump. Mm-hmm. And Latino voters, we're playing on the conservatism there. I mean, I think, like, frankly, the biggest, we're in the midst, obviously, Harris or Biden as the candidate. I think the idea of Harris as a candidate, I think the rewards outweigh the risk, or the potential rewards, or the risks are less than they are with Biden at this point. But one of them certainly is the fact that Harris is a woman, and this is going to, that even more than the fact that she's black, it in my estimation, is going to motivate a different cohort of people than would have otherwise voted to vote against her, because the idea of having a woman as being in charge is so antithetical to that some of these sort of like that will appeal to the cohort of Christians that Trump himself could not.
It will. I mean, Kamala Harris is like made in a lab to scare the white Christian nationalists. I mean, Barack Obama
to scare the white ones, without a doubt. But they're already going to vote, it seems to me, in those numbers. I'm talking about Latino communities, and even perhaps black communities, although I would imagine like Latino communities, there would be more inspiration there. The idea of a female president.
Sure. I mean, well, I don't want to deliberate too much on Kamala Harris's presidency, her presidential candidacy that could or could not manifest. I will say she's a complicated figure in many ways, complex for a lot of folks. She represents the United States in its best form. She's a mixed race person. She's a black person. She's an Asian American person. She has a Jewish husband. I mean, this is America in 2024. For others, that's going to be used against her. It's going to be used against her even in some of those minority ethnic communities. So I think that's a reality. I think the answer, though, to your central question, Sam, is really this. How do you convince the black church, the Latino church to vote for Donald Trump, given his stance on the border, on immigration, on race in general, the Central Park Five, whatever it may be? And I think the answer is, let's look to people who we see in front of us. Byron Donalds, Herschel Walker, folks like this. The key here is to emphasize, what do you want for your country? Do you want a country built with strong men, strong families, based on a husband and a wife, men and women, no pronouns, no non-binary, whatever that means? Do you want to have groomers and perverts in your schools, or do you just want to have a candidate who will support what is the right kind of sex, the right kind of marriage, the right kind of love? Do you want that kind of country over there with the rainbow flag and the gender spectrum? Or do you want strong men leading you into an uncertain future where we are at threat in every turn? That's the sell. The sell is lean on the patriarchy, lean on the gender structure, lean on the sense of the otherness that you talked about earlier. Who is other than me? Well, the people who are lesbian, gay, non-binary, the people who are trans, they're more other than you than the folks who are telling you that Joe Biden is better for the person of color. Be more afraid of them, be more angry at them. And that works in many of these churches. It works in many of these spaces. And so that's the sell. And that's the play.
That's why they call her the DEI. That's why the Post, I think, called her the DEI Barbie. Or
they couldn't print the N word. So
but the point is that by saying the DEI Barbie instead of the N word, they can then sort of appeal to people of color and say, like, she still represents alienness. Well, even though in some areas, I mean, and that's the point, is that they've been able to sort of like convert slightly the terminology so that it can apply. It's sort of like a all-purpose racist otherization that can work, meet the sort of the bigot where they are in some way. Well, I have one also final question, because this, I think, plays a very big part in what we're seeing with the Supreme Court, is Opus Dei. My understanding is that Scalia and Alito, at least, are Opus Dei, that Leonard Leo, who is the who has orchestrated essentially the Supreme Court via the Federalist Society for a couple of decades. Also Opus Dei. I know the Kudlow, I think, is also who was Trump's chief advisor. How does Opus Dei play with this Christian nationalism? Are they just cousins, essentially?
No, they're I think one of the things that I've tried to get across over the last few months is that radical traditional Catholicism, right? This very overwhelmingly conservative strain of Catholicism, of which Opus Dei is a major part in that ecosystem, is at the center of what we now understand the Christian nationalist movement in this country and everything that's happening at the Supreme Court, as well as Project 2025. So let me lay it out. The Heritage Foundation is behind Project 2025. Who starts the Heritage Foundation? Paul Weyrich. Paul Weyrich was a radical traditionalist Catholic. After Vatican II, he started going to a church that where the mass was in Greek because he couldn't stand the vernacular. He broke with his own church because he thought they were too liberal. If you look at the life of Paul Weyrich, he is a strict male supremacist. He's a Christian supremacist, and he is somebody who believes that a dominant patriarch should be the head of the house, the church, and the government. Who is now in charge of the Heritage Foundation? Kevin Roberts, also a traditional Catholic. Okay, so there's a long lineage of the Heritage Foundation having this vision of Christian supremacism. They believe Christ is king, not in religious pluralism. They believe that their Christian values should be infused throughout the government without any question. They believe that male leadership is the way to go, period. So it's no accident to me that Kevin Roberts gets out there in public the other day after the immunity ruling and says, if the left will allow it, we'll have a bloodless revolution. That's a traditional Catholic leading in the lineage of Paul Weyrich, who is articulating that they are so excited for a unified executive in the vision of Project 2025, where a male patriarch will have almost complete control of the executive branch and perhaps the entire government. It's also what we're seeing in SCOTUS. So one of the arguments I made in Politico a couple months ago is that the IVF rulings represent the Catholicization of American sexual ethics. That evangelicals in the 60s were not against abortion. Evangelicals up until recently were not against IVF. But IVF and abortion have been traditionalist Catholic issues for a long, long time. So when you see the Alabama Supreme Court ruling on IVF, or you see the Southern Baptist Convention condemn IVF, they're doing so at the influence of those traditionalist Catholics you're mentioning, the folks who are not only affiliated with Opus Dei, but who are running the Federalist Society, and in many ways are driving the conversation about gender and sex within those with those communities. So if there has ever been a moment of overwhelmingly conservative Catholic forces dominating our politics, it is now, whether you look at the Supreme Court or Project 2025. Project 2025, in its essence, is a rad trad fever dream.
So not cousins, more like grandfathers, fathers of
leaders of the household.
How do they manage to be like? I would say that 70% of what we've talked about, our audience is familiar with in some fashion or another. But I would say there's a much smaller group of people who are, Opus Dei we were talking about Opus Dei more in the aughts than we are today. I think Novak, who was a Washington Post writer and was on Crossfire, was Opus Dei. But it seems to like they got the message. And Opus Dei has always sort of been a little bit secretive, as far as I understand. But they got the message that, like, we need to recede at least. I mean, is that happened, and how has that happened, and how conscious of that was that?
Well, I think there's a sense there of sometimes less is more. Sometimes less name recognition is more. I mean, I think we're seeing this with Trump and Project 2025, right? You're seeing more and more Americans understand what Project 2025 is. So he comes out with this incoherent rant about how he has no idea what it is and he doesn't believe any of it. Well, if you don't know what it is, how do you know you don't believe it? He's just basically trying to do, damage control. It's the same with Opus Dei. If we recede into the background, right? slowly, drip by drip, what we see over the course of the aughts and the Obama years is so much funding, so much network building, right? So much political influence coming into cultivation. By the time we get to the Trump years, it's the Federalist Society who picks us 3 judges, right? By the time we get to 2022, 23, 24, we have people like the Southern Baptist Convention and a Supreme Court justice in Alabama condemning IVF. I mean, that is an overwhelming victory for the likes, not only of Opus Dei, but anyone in that traditional Catholic universe. They feel enormous victory, and I dare say enormous momentum right now. Leonard Leo's at a place where he's like, I got the court.
He's got $1 billion. People have forgotten this, but he was given $1 billion with a B dollars to basically go be an authoritarian entrepreneur. Wherever you can push this agenda, do it.
We've already got the court in his mind. That's what he's thinking. And so let's go get the state legislatures and let's go get Congress. I mean, and make Congress even worse than it is now. I mean,
well, that controversy, just to add to it, with the kicker from the Kansas City Chiefs, Harrison Butker, that he was speaking at a college where Leonard Leo has connections and has donated, as well as Josh Hawley, having connections to that too.
Leo was the commencement speaker the year before.
Yep.
Right. So here we have Harrison Butker, 28-year-old kicker, and the year before it was Leonard Leo. And so I think that, I mean, it just follows along everything you're saying, Emma.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. And
good thing the Democrats are in a great position to beat this back right now.
This is your cue, Brad, to say something like, "Oh, but here's the good story."
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I think for me, here's a couple things we could take away. Perhaps is we got news of stunning left center victories in France over the last couple of days. Yeah. Labour is in power in the UK, and the Tories are gone after 14 years. Whether we look to places like Mexico or the pushback on Modi in India, there are people across the world saying no to fascism. And I think for me, the hope lies in a message that says, look, Biden, Harris, whomever, we have a chance to say no to fascism. We have a chance to say no to totalitarianism. And there are people across the world who've already signaled that they understand the threat and they're doing the same. So, yeah, I'm not going to prognosticate, and I'm never going to take the foot off the gas of trying to reveal to people just what a dire situation we face right now, because we do. But there's always hope, and hope springs from organizing and togetherness. And if people are willing to like rub shoulders with other human beings, you often feel a sense of momentum and a sense of hope grow. And so that's my encouragement. Go do one thing you don't usually do. And don't sit on the sidelines as we kind of descend into what could be a summer of despair.
Brad Onishi, writer, co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast, founder of Axis Mundi Media, author of Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. We will put a link to that book at majority.fm and in the podcast and YouTube description. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, folks. That's it for the first half of the program. We'll head into the fun half.
Not surprising we went a full hour on white Christian nationalism.
No.
But as relevant as ever.
Yeah.
Even more so.
Yeah,
I love that.
I mean,
he got hooked in because of women, and not just, this is a misogynist point. Just social embeddedness describes so much of this, and we get confused when we look at the ideas and not the actual, society that these things are embedded in.
100%. It's also really fascinating to sort of like have this level of awareness of that this Catholic fundamentalism is driving this. I mean, that's like, Matt Walsh.
I've seen it in my family. I remember talking with one of my cousins years ago, like 2012 or something like that, about abortion. And he's like, well, if the Democrats, stack the court against, I mean, what a great hypothetical that was back then. But if the Democrats win the Supreme Court back with pro-choice justices, then he was out on democracy. And that was from like going to like, the Ohio Christian Catholic conferences or events, the Steubenville, I think it's called, in like Ohio or something like that, and you come back with these. There's like a hard right political agenda being passed on, in addition to all the let's be the Jesus-y.
Yeah. It's a scary time, folks. It's a scary time. Before we head to the fun half, I just want to mention again that we lost somebody that we knew that we were going to lose shortly. Jane McAlevey has passed away. She was a we don't have guests on. We don't have guests on generally more than once or twice, just as a practice. Unless they have repeated books or whatnot. Jane was one of the few exceptions who we would bring on both for her books and with just different events that were happening in around labor. She was a real inspiration to a lot of people. I'm glad that she got to live to see sort of what I think many people feel is a revival of not just unionism, but rank and file unionism and the idea of organizing as opposed to advocating. And we'll set up a playlist of the interviews we did with her, I think over the course of maybe 7, 8, 10 years, maybe more at this point. But she passed away. We don't have any word on where maybe if there's any type of memorial or a place you can donate in her name, but just wanted to note it. Really one of our favorite guests. And so many people are inspired by her.
I mean, really, the books like that people should be going to when they have a lot of questions on this stuff.
Yeah.
Like if you are organizing, YouTubers aren't going to tell you what to do. McAlevey and her books will give you more of a textbook on that stuff.
And we will we'll put a link to some of those interviews, and we're going to set up a playlist on YouTube so you can go and check those out, and then find those books as well. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you also support the show and get the fun half. Jointhemajority.report.com. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop. It's a co-op. It's owned by everybody who works there. They also are fair trade. They treat their suppliers like family, frankly. And the coffee's great. Justcoffee.coop. You can get the Majority Report blend or any other blend, and you can get 10% off of all of it using the coupon code MAJORITY. Emma, ESVN.
ESPN, it's off-season time. We'll be talking a little bit about the WNBA, some of these incredible rookie records and Rookie of the Year that a few of the women in the league are chasing. I also want to have some off-season fun, preview NFL, NBA, NHL seasons by tiering some of the teams. And the NFL has lost in court in an antitrust, or actually not antitrust, I apologize. It was essentially a class action suit about along antitrust lines, basically about Sunday Ticket and them artificially inflating the price. We'll give you an update on the status of that. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
Matt.
Left Reckoning, Gene Bajalan on for patrons, patreon.com. Just Left Reckoning, talking about the UK elections, which, I mean, a certain type of Democrat must be really envious of the Labour Party because they basically didn't have to do anything and just wait for the right-wing party to completely collapse and be split into a couple pieces and lose votes over the previous elections that still win a massive majority. So we talk about that, and also Jeremy Corbyn winning as independent, which I think is really good news and shows, I think, a model going forward is to deliver for your constituents, and I guess hopefully that can be repeated by like Tlaib and some other people under pressure in America. But patreon.com/Left Reckoning to talk about Gene, or talk with Gene.
Also, one other note, and we'll probably have them on at the end of this week, but a bunch of folks are leaving The Intercept to set up a new media enterprise that is going to maintain the investigative journalism that The Intercept is most well known for. Ryan Grimm, Jeremy Scahill, others are heading over there. It's sort of a fascinating thing that they're doing. They, in part, it was, we'll let
it's
Ryan
called
talk about
Dropsite. It's called
Dropsite.
Yeah, dropsitenews.com.
We will tell you more about it over the coming days, Ryan, and I think Jeremy will be on maybe on Friday, talk about the news in general and also talk about their new project. I have known both these guys now for probably 20 years and have always appreciated their work. I mean, there are times where I disagree with some of the stuff that they focus on, but in the main, like I found their work to be incredibly rigorous and challenging. They are without a doubt worth supporting, and the other writers they're going to bring over there, we'll talk more about it later in the week. But if you have an opportunity and you want to support a good site, they're a good one to do. And I think they're set up as a nonprofit too. So great.
Definitely hope they can, grow and fill some of the space, whatever happens to The Intercept. But, it's not, we have all criticisms of The Intercept and Madire and stuff like that, but it's bad to lose a giant institution that publishes important work.
Exactly.
Yeah. And The Intercept's going to still continue. I don't know how, if it's going to be nearly as interesting. My guess is it won't be, but the more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. And certainly I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys put out in this at Dropsite News. All right, quick break, fun half. See you there. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians. They're so stupid though. Common sense says, of course.
gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him!
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
We're back, folks.
Hi, folks. We're back. I know. I'm just taking notes. It's all right. It's the fun half. It's also, it's
the relaxed.
People have fun. It's relaxed.
We're chill. Everyone's
chill.
It's the dead air half.
Yeah, man. We're just having fun. Oh,
What broadcaster do you think made the most use of poignant dead air?
Hmm.
Limbaugh used to do a lot of
use
it. Yeah, Limbaugh used to do a lot of it, I feel like. Just he's looking for something on his desk.
100%. That's where that's basically what I trained.
You went to Rush Boot Camp?
Limbaugh Broadcast Academy?
Camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't remember half of it because of all the prescription pills they
One of the things
pushed
you had
on
to
you.
do was the oxy.
Tolerance test.
Yeah.
Ronnie Jackson there.
The thing that I never mastered that he did, I used to listen to a lot of right-wing talk radio. The thing that I never mastered that he did, he never did this and that. He did He put a B on the end of all of his ahs.
It's genius.
More masculine?
I don't know. I was obsessed with what that did. And I think what it did is it was less distracting. Because somehow the B at the end of it made it seem maybe I would maybe I should look at it on a waveform. But
because more open-ended and continuous, and it brings it to a stop, but makes the point nonetheless.
Oh, it's even more continuous because you can go
exactly.
there we go. The consonant at the end
forces you to shut your mouth quick. Yeah. All right, let's go to number 50.
Please, I want to see you try to self-consciously deploy instead of and ah. And just see your brain work and try to do it.
Yeah, don't take the ums and ahs out. Just change them to
It's a rebrand. Give it a facelift.
Limbaugh be like on the IM. I've taken so many of these damn pills that I can no longer come.
Can't get it up.
God.
Ugh.
Anyways, anyways, folks. Apropos of our interview with Brad Onishi, this is North Carolina gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson. Back on June 30th, endorsed. This is about a week or so ago. Just came out a couple of days ago. He's at a black church in North Carolina. He is African American himself, and this is what Onishi was talking about in terms of Trump and the Republican strategy to win more black and Latino votes. They are not going for an open-ended solicitation of black or Latino votes. They are looking for fervently religious Black and Latino folks.
Well, to be fair, he's speaking at a white church here, so it's not a black church. I just wanted
but
to.
But he's a black guy speaking at a white church.
But he's a black guy
used for propaganda.
Yeah. Right.
And so he's out there still being able to communicate this notion of an other, whereas many of the people in this particular audience may have perceived him as the other. The important thing is to say there's another other out there that's worse than this other. And that is a message that they're hoping is going to resonate with at least a small slice. They don't need many. Right. And it won't resonate with many, but it will resonate with a small slice. And
Trump is up in North Carolina, right? Like, this is one of the states that Democrats are panicking about losing. Even in that morning consult poll, which was the most favorable to Biden, Trump was up in North Carolina. And so there's actually a real fear that this guy could win. Even though there's
I don't think Democrats have won North Carolina since 2008. So it's not, but they have.
But they've had a Democratic governor.
They have won the governorship, and so there's a real opportunity for this guy to win. And one more Black national figure who is focusing on sort of the otherization via this Christian fundamentalism.
It was a time when we used to meet evil on the battlefield, and guess what we did to it? We killed it. We didn't quibble about it. We didn't argue about it. We didn't fight about it. We killed it. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, what do? We flew to Japan. And we killed the Japanese Army and Navy. We didn't even quibble about it. I didn't start this fight. You did. You wanted to be left alone. You should have left me alone. We didn't argue and capitulate and talk about, well, maybe we shouldn't fight the Nazis that hard. No, they're bad. Kill them. Some liberal somewhere is going to say that sounds awful. Too bad.
Closet. You know what's amazing about this? What's amazing about this is that there's not an applause line for killing Nazis. There's not an applause line for killing our enemies. The applause line comes when he claims he's going to offend liberals.
I mean,
it is so fascinating.
That's really their modus operandi, right? Or the way that Republicans
organizing
are.
Principle.
That's why Trump was the candidate and remains 100%. Like having, the hearts of these voters is because he triggers the libs more than anybody.
100%.
Get mad at me if you want to. Some folks need killing.
Okay.
It's time for somebody to say it. It's not a matter of vengeance. It's not a matter of being mean or spiteful. It's a matter of necessity. We have wicked people doing wicked things, torturing and murdering and raping. It's time to call out those guys in green and go have them handle it. Or those boys in blue and have them go handle it. We need to start handling our business again because, guys, what I said at the beginning about you getting in your cars, listening to your radio, putting on what you want to put on, and saying what you want to put on, keep thinking about it. Don't you feel it slipping away? Don't you feel it slipping away? The further away we get from the concept of 1776 and why we declared our independence and how we declared our independence, the further we start sliding into making 1776 a distant memory.
What's fascinating here to me, too, is he immediately goes from he's talking about killing general rapists and murderers, and it's unclear he wants to deploy the military and the cops to kill. And then he's talking about some values about how government, 1776 thing is a code for being away from Christianity and for he's not just talking about killing rapists and muggers and whatnot. He's talking about a whole set of other people that he's not going to name. So he's going to talk about getting away from 1776.
And then when he mentions the cops too, you know what he's also alluding to there, which is essentially that, you know, we shouldn't be protesting when cops kill innocent black people. Some people just need killing.
1776, when Jesus wrote the Constitution. Also, he says, like, we went over and killed the Japanese Army and Navy. Really? Is that all we killed with the atomic bombs? Just the Army and Navy? Like, it's funny when you're speaking this tough and you can't even actually speak plainly about what we did. We killed a bunch of civilians. Should we have done that?
But Republicans do that all the time, right? Or right-wingers. They'll go up to the acceptable precipice, although he did cross it by saying some folks need killing. I don't know, in my estimation. This guy's endorsed by Trump, by the way. He's been he called school shooting survivors, I think it was in Parkland, media prostitutes. This is the guy that I'm like Biden. Here's a guy who shared a meme mocking Harvey Weinstein accusers. He said homosexuality will lead to pedophilia and the end of civilization. Has called Michelle Obama a man. So just like the average Republican at this point in this country.
Also, this was said about abolitionists. Just to put it in the scope of American history, people should be killed. Like, yeah, go read about the run up to the Civil War in this country.
This guy could be governor of North Carolina, and then it's just off to the races. It's a proof of concept. Meanwhile, there's a lot of news out from Gaza and around Gaza. Let's start with this. The Lancet, British medical journal, has come out with a new report that estimates that if the war, the assault on Gaza were to end today, that the final death toll is going to be closer to about 190,000 people in Gaza. This is going to represent 8 to 10% of the population in Gaza. And, 190,000. I mean, close to 200,000 of people in Gaza. They believe that the numbers that have been put out by the Ministry of Health, the Hamas-run Ministry of Health, cannot possibly be even remotely accurate, and is more than likely, much more than likely, a serious undercount. Now, of course, this is also what Israeli intelligence has said. Many aid organizations have said there's just no way in a country where 60 to 70% of the housing has been destroyed, where the infrastructure has been assaulted, where there is no food, there is no water on a regular basis, and there's no electricity, that they could properly account. There's just an unfathomable amount of tons of buildings that have been leveled, that people are under.
And disease and
disease
starvation.
That they're anticipating.
But don't tell that to the House, which passed on a bipartisan basis along with the appropriations bill, an effort to block the State Department from citing statistics from the Gaza Ministry of Health, because they claim it's in basically false numbers as an overcount, which is the Israeli government or AIPAC line. But this is Lancet Medical Journal. Save the Children said over 20,000 children are unaccounted for, in addition to the 16,000 we know have been killed by Israel. So just highlighting the disconnect between our representatives and what they're trying to put into our law successfully at this point, at least on the House side, and what the reality is on the ground.
This obviously is not. It's horrific. I don't know how surprising it is. Word is out now that Hamas has acceded to, I guess, newer Israeli demands. It's very hard to sort of follow what was actually a ceasefire proposal and what, but essentially saying, yes, in exchange for a ceasefire so that we can get some humanitarian aid in here, we agree that you will not stop attacking Gaza at one point, that you have an open-ended ability to wage war and don't have to enter an agreement where you will end this war. It remains to be seen if that's going to in any way influence Israel, because essentially it is quite clear that part of the agenda is to wreak as much havoc, destruction, and death in Gaza as possible. Here is a pediatrician in Gaza. This is from interviewed by Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud. This is from yesterday. We're going to do just audio only for the first 30 seconds because there's some
disturbing
graphic B-roll, and then we will cut to the actual visual.
More specific about cases that you have been dealing with since your arrival to the hospital to volunteer inside this only remaining health facilities. Like, walk us through some of the cases that are experiencing traumatizing conditions, particularly among the children and women.
This is especially poignant and hard to speak about, given what happened yesterday. There was a bombing of one of the schools, and we had child after child after child get brought into the resuscitation room with different extents of traumatic injury. Standing over one child intubated with a depressed skull fracture, another with a shrapnel injury, probably 10 years old, so severe that we could see an exposed kidney and likely a transected spinal cord, trying to rush them to the OR to salvage what we could. And then in the backdrop, as a pediatrician, I see small children sitting in the corner with lesser physical traumatic injuries, but no doubt witnessing death and destruction and dying in a way that their little brains and could never be capable of coping with. And so we spoke about this briefly, but the psychological impact beyond the physical impact will be generational. And so if I go into the psychiatric understanding of epigenetics, and we talk about exposing small children with plastic brains, meaning the ability to morph and change to this level of stress, physiologic stress from adrenaline and stress hormone. We sit here and we hear the hums above us of drones, which can often mean another attack is coming, and the children, they're completely aware of this, and they look up in fear and they're startled by any loud noise. The effect on the unraveling of DNA and the epigenetic research shows us and tells us that this is often permanently opened, and that the impact can even be carried generationally in their children. The trauma doesn't just happen in the 3 or 4-year-olds now, it happens in their children and their children after them. And so this would take decades of therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy to try to unravel and unwrap, and the worst part is we're still in it. So there's no opportunity to deal with psychological and psychiatric trauma when we're still dealing with the physical trauma, the lack of surviving today, finding clean water, finding enough medication to survive today. So thinking about the long-term effects seems silly, except that you watch these kids' eyes, and that's all I can think about is even the ones who survive will experience trauma forever.
I mean, you heard it in his voice there, and some of course, the descriptors, but I've seen footage of a child shaking uncontrollably, hiding behind the leg of an IDF soldier as the body of a woman is behind him. I've seen footage of children's body parts, presumably mangled to the point where, I don't know, it's nearly slipping through people's hands who are holding them. I mean, I'm being graphic here, but of course, all this drama with Biden has taken up a lot of our energy and focus, but I do think they're interconnected in the sense that the White House's rudderless leadership on this front is enabling this genocide, whether it be Biden just being too old to in his perspective, or the fact that as this drama happens, perhaps you're skeptical, I don't know, but I mean, they're increasing the attacks on Gaza City, even though and media, and I think the Israeli government is quite aware of the United States' coverage or when its attention is diverted. And some of the worst slaughters have happened over the past few days.
He's shifted now to running on his character, and his character is one of the great bloodletters of the 21st century. And I am exasperated by the media, which still covers this as if it's some sort of unintended byproduct of counterterrorism, when really this is part of the policy. Like, how many Israeli cabinet members do we need to hear say every Palestinian born is a terrorist before we understand that this is actually part of what they're intending to do?
This is not a bug. This is a feature of the program. I mean, this is it's the Brookings Foundation, a notoriously sort of centrist, maybe left-leaning only to the extent that it's like they actually do
to the left of Nixon.
To the left of Nixon, but anything that actually is just not, that is actually doing any studies is supposedly considered, left leaning, but it's a centrist institution. I mean, genuinely centrist. They asked 750 Middle East experts to describe Israeli actions in Gaza. 41% said major war crimes akin to genocide. 34% said genocide. 16% said not akin to genocide, but still major war crimes. That's 90%. So a plurality says akin to genocide. The second largest plurality is genocide. The third largest plurality is just major war crimes. I don't know what the other 9% said.
But if you take that Lancet figure where it's up to around 189, 190,000, that's around 8% of the 2.3 million Gaza population. That's genocide.
Even if it's half that.
It already was, but because of the intent, the obvious intent.
If it's up to almost 8%, that's literally almost a decimation of Palestinians.
Yeah.
Let alone the desire to also inflict upon them conditions of life that make it impossible to sustain itself. That is the destruction of Gaza is a part of that as well. So.
We'll deal with this for generations. He mentions epigenetics there. That's something we've talked about here in this country. This is going to reproduce itself, and not in a good way.
We talk about the generational trauma the Jewish people who experienced the Holocaust have experienced, and how that gets passed down. The generational trauma of the children of enslaved people in this country, and the people of Palestine will be experiencing the same thing, and our government is complicit in it. It's unconscionable.
CNN was allowed into Rafah for the first time since the Israeli military launched its ground assault back in late May?
Yeah.
May. And despite the fact that it was claimed that their operation was limited, this reporter, Jeremy Diamond, writes, and I imagine did a video thing. We haven't been able to find it. That huge swaths of Rafah are just devastated. Foreign journalists are barred from entering Gaza independently. The only access is via embeds with the Israeli military. So it is unclear what's happening with the other
CNN, by the way.
But that's what's going on there. That, of course, was Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden's red line. I personally don't think it's helpful to sort of speculate whether he forgot there was a red line or he forgot about Rafah or whatever. clearly the Biden's ideological stance on this is to allow Israel to do whatever it wants, does not see the humanity of people in Gaza at all. Palestinian people probably writ large, not at all. Whether that's a function, it may be exacerbated by his diminished capacities or not. I don't know, but this feels like it's, consistent with his ideology. I mean, I definitely think that from what I've read, there's been a lot of drop off with Biden over the past 6 months. And I don't see his position 6 months ago to be dramatically different than it's been now. Let's play this clip from CNN.
Yeah. So this isn't either way. We all know that, like, when the older grandpa gets, sometimes his most racist views come a little bit more out as they get older. At least that's been some of my experience. Perhaps Biden's racism against Palestinians is a little bit at the forefront of his mind.
Has been given rare access to war-torn Rafah. That's a city in southern Gaza that has been ravaged by months of relentless Israeli military operations. And in this new report, CNN's Jeremy Diamond embeds with Israeli military to bring you a closer look from the front lines of the war. It's important to note, CNN reported from Gaza under Israeli Defense Forces escort at all times. CNN retained editorial control over the final report and did not submit any footage to the IDF for review.
Thick clouds of sand shroud the road to Rafah. But as the dust settles, the destruction is unmistakable. Flattened homes and bombed out buildings, Gaza's last refuge devastated by the Israeli military assault on this city.
We are now entering the third month of Israeli military operations in Rafah, and you can see all around me the kind of destruction that these last 2+ months of military operations have wrought inside of the city of Rafah. All around destruction, very similar to the kind that I've seen in central Gaza, as well as in the northern part of the Strip.
This is the first time CNN has gotten access to this devastated city. Israel and Egypt have barred journalists from Gaza, except under tightly controlled military embeds like this.
We're working in this area very, very precise, very, very accurate. Unfortunately, the destruction is one to blame, Hamas.
The Israeli military says it has killed over 900 Hamas fighters here and believes it is close to defeating the group's Rafah brigade. The fighting is clearly not over yet. Nor is the effort to uncover Hamas's vast network of tunnels in Rafah.
This tunnel goes down over 28 meters underneath the ground,
as well as along Gaza's border with Egypt.
Right behind me here is the Egypt-Gaza border. We are now driving along what is known as the Philadelphia Corridor, a strategic corridor that the Israeli military seized 2 months ago. They say they did so because they believe Hamas was smuggling weapons across from Egypt and then from this area deeper into Gaza.
Israeli forces say they have uncovered dozens of tunnel shafts here, but cannot definitively say if any of the tunnels stretching into Egypt were operational.
We found dozens like the tunnels that you saw, and we are researching those tunnels carefully, making sure which ones were functional, which ones are not functional anymore because maybe they were from the Egyptian side stopped.
So will this be the last ground operation then, Rafah?
I won't say that because what you will see is when we'll have intelligence that maybe.
All right, I don't want to hear. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's a joke.
Oh, and we didn't even mention the Haaretz report from over the weekend about the fact that there's been some leaks to Haaretz that basically the IDF instructed on October 7th the soldiers who were responding to the Hamas attack to not let any cars head back into Gaza, paraphrasing a bit, but the anonymous IDF soldiers quoted basically say, well, of course there's going to be hostages in those cars. This was a bit of a previously held Israeli Defense Force operating procedure called the Hannibal Directive that had been supposedly done away with because it was such a political liability.
Because it got found out.
And it got found out, meaning it's okay if you kill Israelis as long as you're showing force against Hamas or
don't let them take
Palestinians.
hostages.
Don't let them take hostages. Kill them if need be. And then there had been long speculation that that had been the directive, or at least implicitly, on October 7th. And there's more drip from Haaretz indicating that as well.
In other words, too, I mean, it begs the question, how many of the dead on that day were ultimately killed by Israeli forces, not just in a question of a crossfire, but as a tactical measure to prevent Hamas from getting any type of leverage in any type of negotiations. So we will find out more about that later. Let's go to the IMs. Desert Bitch. Sam looking so handsome today. Must be UK and France elections. Indeed. Yes. Thank you. Sam sounds like
Sam
he's on
loves
the phone. Better now.
Sam loves to dress himself up for other countries' elections.
Yep. Something wrong with the audio. Chris Burdick. To make an old dying man happy, we're letting him run a race he can't win, and we're dooming ourselves to the fascist apocalypse. Even the Make-A-Wish Foundation doesn't go that hard. You know, what's interesting, though, I think, like, look, I hope the outcome here is that we end up with a candidate who at the very least can do replacement level things, you know, in regards to Donald Trump. I think because of the timing and whatnot, I mean, Kamala Harris would not be my first pick. It's hard for me to even say who would be my first pick out of the sort of the people who are floated. Many of them are you know, from an ideological perspective, I have a problem with a lot of them. I think there are just sort of, if you're looking at just as a political matter in terms of like elections, there are other candidates who are probably stronger than Harris. I don't know. This is very difficult to predict. But one thing is clear to me is that there is no time to have some type of like mini primary.
And would that be more democratic than replacing Biden with the person who he was on the ticket with, small d Democratic? Because people voted for Biden, and she was essential to his ticket. People voted for Biden knowing he was 81 with her on the
I would argue
the potential replacement.
Not only is it less democratic, because people have voted for Biden Harris. They have. Not only is it less democratic, but it's also like there's absolutely no the logic to it is absurd. There's no, you're not going to tell someone's a better candidate because of a 1 week primary with like round table. Like, I'm sorry. There's just
people
no
treat
way.
this like a meritocracy, or like as if it's American Idol. It's the best singer. Let's do it. A little competition, where so much of this is about infrastructure. It's about circumstance.
I kind of feel like a party worth its salt should be able to, like, it's a long, I'm looking at these other countries that had elections in the span of like a few months. Like, I think a functioning party should hypothetically be able to do something like this, say the top of the ticket dies.
But we can't
I don't
get
trust
him
the
out.
Democrats to do that.
We can barely get Biden out.
Right. I'm just saying, but if we got him out, a hypothetical, like what Clyburn's floating. Like,
No. But the problem is that like the reality, if it was the case that the Republicans were picking their nominee now, then I would say yes. But the problem is that so much about this is about an enormous amount of money. So much of this is about, buying ad time. It's the nature of our elections that are problematic as to why it doesn't fit. Can you pick a candidate within 3 or 4 weeks? Maybe, but not with the system that we have set up. Right now, the Biden-Harris campaign has offices they've already opened. in swing states. They have money that's been deployed. They have already begun to purchase ad time and like all
By
this
the
is in
way,
the
like completely outspending Trump on ads. That's the other thing that's really concerning for a lot of folks is that the Biden campaign has been outspending Trump in these swing states and is still trailing and putting states like Minnesota, New Mexico, and Virginia, previously unspeakable states to be in play, putting them in play because of his age.
Here is, this is going to be fraught no matter how. This is one of those situations where it's like you're making the best of a bad situation. That's it. There's no magic bullet here at all. Right. And the fascinating thing too, I think people should appreciate this, regardless of what happens. And I tend to think that Biden's going to let go, but he may not. But I hope that people take this opportunity too to realize there is no Democratic Party, or there is, but it's not like there's a person who makes a decision, flips a switch, and things happen. Like this is,
no,
they're all trying to have to convince each other, and then they all have to sort of like convince each other that they can convince Biden, and then Biden has to be convinced despite his family. I'm not saying that these aren't people who have aligned interests, and I'm not saying that they have more power than your average person who goes and vote for Democrats. Of course they do. But there is no like, we've heard time and time again about how, X, Y, or Z has been manufactured by the Democratic Party, or the Democratic Party wants to lose on purpose, or things like this. There's no one entity that runs this. It's a series of people who have agendas, personal agendas, professional agendas. Sometimes they align, sometimes they don't. That's what's going on here. Barack Obama is like tiptoeing around this. It's one thing for him to call Pete Buttigieg, who was mayor of Indianapolis, and say, hey man, you're not going to win this. So what's the best outcome you can get? It's this, do that. And then you'll get that. But
there are power players.
It was. Yeah, it wasn't even Indianapolis.
It was another South Bend. But there are power players in the sense that this is a test for Hakeem Jeffries taking over for Nancy Pelosi, because the House is gettable. The House in theory should be gettable for the Democrats in this election, especially because Trump is such an unpopular candidate. Abortion being on the ballot in a variety of states, even deep red states that could drive turnout. And so they're convening this House meeting tomorrow with Hakeem Jeffries because does he want to actually be in such a deep hole as Democrats leader when he's already been presiding over a very slim majority and sees the ability for there to be, some sort of majority for him to make his legacy right in front of him, because Biden is dragging down the ticket. And that's why you're hearing this drip from
but I
members of the House.
That's how it goes. I think it's more, he gets calls from members and he's responsive. I don't think he's sitting there on his own. I mean, he has his own opinion.
That's not what I'm saying. Yeah.
But, and so it's really a question of and they'll find out during these caucus meetings. I mean, he tiered this, right? First he hears from sort of senior members of his caucus, and then he's going to open it up to the entire caucus. And if he doesn't have the majority of his caucus, he's not going to go and say anything to Biden.
That's not what I'm saying, but I do think that the caucus is going to be very concerned based on what we're hearing, even just publicly at this point. And the reporting we're hearing in caucus,
and then he confers with Schumer, who I imagine is I don't want. I'm between a rock and a hard place here. I don't want to offend anyone.
So far, his itinerary today has been about 9 a.m. on Morning Joe saying, I don't care what the millionaires think, and about noon saying, or being on a call with donors. So,
well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, on some level too, he's prepping for NATO, but the point is it's indicative of he has limited bandwidth. Here is CNN's Harry Enton breaking down how polls overestimated Biden's support in 2020. And that Biden right now is in his worst position he's ever been in against Trump. Now, this is, in many respects, this whole thing with Biden is just math. To the extent that you can sort of know what the inputs are, that's the only place where it's unclear. But how this works is pretty straightforward.
I just want to point out where the polls are now, where they were at this point back in 2020, and Joe Biden's worst position in the polls back in 2020. Right now, Donald Trump leads in an aggregate of national polls by about 3 percentage points. If you go back 4 years ago at this point, Joe Biden was ahead by 9 points. This right now don't look anything like what we saw 4 years ago at this point. I then decided to take it a step further. What was Biden's worst 2020 polling position? He was ahead by 4 points, which basically matched what he ended up beating Donald Trump by in the national popular vote. So this 3-point advantage for Donald Trump is Donald Trump's best position versus Joe Biden, whether you include the polls this year or you include the polls last cycle. The idea that the polls underestimated Joe Biden last time around, simply put, does not hold any water, Mr. Berman.
Not in the general election, certainly. What about in terms of being underestimated in the Trump era in general?
Yeah. So I decided to expand upon our search. Who outperformed their July national polls? This is major elections during the Trump era. We can start in the midterms, right? Take a look here. This is a 2022 midterm. Wow. This is a generic congressional ballot. In fact, Republicans were underestimated by a point. They outperformed their July polls and the actual result by a percentage point. You go back to 2018, Democrats did outperform their polls, but just by a point. Basically, the polls were right on at this particular point in the midterm elections. We talk about the presidential race. Last time around, Donald Trump actually did better in the results than his July polls by 5 points. You go back to 2016, you see something very similar. That is, the July polls actually underestimated Donald Trump. He outperformed his July polls. So the idea in the Trump era that the polls have underestimated Democrats, whether it be in a Joe Biden matchup, whether it be a matchup against Hillary Clinton, whether it be in the midterms, at least in the national polling that right now shows Donald Trump in his strongest position, simply put, is not true. If anything, the polls have underestimated Republicans during the Trump era, especially in the presidential races in 2016 and in 2020.
On that.
That is the key point, because all I'm hearing from Blue and On is that
is Trump level lies about
polling. Yeah.
And there's also an argument that we don't, the polling is off because we don't know who is actually going to vote, and it's going to be uniquely. But if that's the case, nobody does. When we only have one data point, right? Like everything else is just sort of speculation. The one thing that's real is what we saw on the debate stage. If this was a week before the election, that's what it would be, and that's the end of the story. But it's not. And that gives A, the opportunity to switch candidates, and B, the potential that our existing candidate will run into another situation like that, and there won't be time left to make a change. And so that's what, people are faced with. With that said, there are a lot of challenges associated with Biden leaving. Here is one of them expressed by Representative David Jolly. Now, I don't know how much more effective or how less effective lawsuits will be if the candidate is Kamala Harris, because she's on there. And if Joe Biden was the nominee, had been nominated, and then stepped down because of health reasons, there would be no controversy as to who would fill his slot. There'd be no controversy from a ballot perspective. There'd be no controversy in terms of of any perspective. Here is David Jolly on with Alex Witt yesterday on MSNBC.
Something that has not been talked about, the mechanics of replacing him.
Oh, yeah.
The piece that hasn't been talked about is Republicans will sue in virtually every state that matters. Not all 50 states, but they're going to sue the moment Democrats try to make this move to block access to the ballot of whoever.
Like it's a bait and switch or something?
Well, ballot access rules are state controlled.
Okay.
So they will choose about 20 states that really matter. And they will tie this up in the courts and go all the way to the Supreme Court before November to say you cannot replace Joe Biden on the ballot. They won't win many of them, but if they win a couple critical states, that matters to the presidency. So I'm not a Democrat, as I said last week. If you're going to replace Joe Biden because of the polls, there's a lot of work that's got to get done. Something that.
I've seen that claim. I've seen some people basically say that like the ballot printing process doesn't really start until September. So that's for some of the states where it's more open.
Rachel Bickhofer, who I haven't been impressed by lately, got fact-checked by Twitter saying that in Nevada particularly, Biden would have trouble, and apparently that deadline hasn't even passed yet. So I don't know how sincere this is. I think it's a concern, but I'm also seeing it maybe deployed in ways that seem less than sincere.
And it's
I think
interesting.
it's a concern, and I think it's, frankly, less significant with Harris, because there is no documents that have been filed with any state anywhere or with the Federal Election Committee that doesn't include her name in the Biden campaign, because she's going to be the nominee. It's also the same, I think, with the campaign money. And I would imagine it's also sort of like you're already in the Biden-Harris sort of organization, as it were. If you're, it would be the easiest, I feel, for campaign workers to sort of absorb in this instance. So, I mean, the idea that you would do some type of you develop a new, you're gonna come up with a new system of choosing a president. You're going to develop it and execute it in a matter of weeks for a national campaign. It's just absurd. This isn't like we've been doing this for decades and we know how to do it. And the idea that we don't have the muscle memory for a brokered convention. Well, the fact of the matter is that when we had a brokered convention, we barely had any primaries. It was a completely different system. It wasn't just that we don't have the muscle memory now. We have a fundamentally different musculature. We've had surgery. We've had, it's a completely different system. People don't realize this, but there was no, the number of primaries in 1965. There's so few.
And I'll just say this, because I've been focusing a lot on this. The MSNBC coverage has kind of really downplayed this, to be honest with you. They're putting up the Morning Consult and Bloomberg polls, which are the two most favorable ones for Biden that I've seen so far. We just had Emerson come out, and Biden does not look like that. It does not look like that polling. So I think, frankly, there's a little bit of holding their fire, I think, until we see how the rest of other Democrats begin to respond if they want to ramp up the pressure. But yeah, Biden also, during that interview with Stephanopoulos, he kept saying, "Only I can do the job," over and over again.
Well, let's play. Do we have that? Do we have that clip?
And the thing that frustrates me about that is how he's undercutting his own ticket, because there is a chance that Harris takes over. And I found that to be one of the most selfish things I've seen in American politics in quite some time, let alone his desire to stay on as Trump looms. But the fact that he's undercutting his own vice president publicly in the first interview he did post-debate by saying, "Only I can do the job," even though increasingly a lot of Democrats are getting behind her, just shows how selfish this man is and how he has been his whole career.
Well, let me just add, it's not a question of neurological. Hold on for a second. It's not just a question of whether people are getting behind her or not. The fact is, he's in his early 80s. He's going to be in his mid 80s by the end of this term. It is by no means some type of fantastical notion that his vice president is a heartbeat away from the presidency. We were saying this about John McCain and Sarah Palin, right? It's not a crazy idea that there are other people who can do the job. That's theoretically why you picked a vice president.
Right.
But here he is.
I don't know if we pulled that part. The clip where Biden was saying, "Only I can do the job."
Sorry, I'm just not sure if it's from the Stephanopoulos or the
No, yes, from
So
Stephanopoulos.
let me just give me a second. I'm just going to comb through it.
Okay.
No, don't. Play the... Play
Yeah.
the. All right, forget it. Let's move on to some IMs. Let's just go forward. I mean, we're not gonna wait 5 minutes to get that. Let's play this Dave Rubin clip. This is pretty fun. Dave Rubin was really hoping for a clear-cut fascist win in France. Because, of course, gay people apparently do much better under right-wing regimes, according to him.
Yeah.
This is courtesy of Dave Clips on Twitter, perhaps one of the most important Twitter feeds in the country right now.
Marine Le Pen's party will most likely take control of the French government. This is a good sign, guys. My friend Erin Wexler had that on the show a bunch of times. She tweeted this, which I thought was quite spectacular in relation to that video we just showed you. Witnessing the best contagion of my lifetime, conservatism. And that really is right. It doesn't mean conservatism in the most specific way we agree on every policy, but we agree we have nation states for a reason. You're allowed to be proud of your country. Your country should have law and order and everything else, or anything else. And they're not far right. Let's be clear. Yes, could there be some racist people there? Of course. But the left is full of racist people. These are people who just want their countries and their cultures back. They want to feel safe on the streets. They don't want their women being raped. They don't want to be walking down the street in Dublin and suddenly have 50 tents full of Palestinians who they have no idea who they are or what their intentions are. So there is some hope, guys. So I think we had a nice round show for you. We came all the way around 360 because we gave you some inspiration at the beginning from El Salvador and from, where did we start? And Argentina, of course. And we brought you home in France. And in the middle, it was filled with a lot of craziness in America, but let's pick our direction. Let's do that. And I have to say that my brain is still in recovery mode from taking
And there's the
so many
results, the
high-level
new popular front.
ideas.
Yes, in other words, the fascist lot. So not only is his predictive skills once again proven to be like some of the worst ever. I mean, it's just amazing how wrong he's been over the past 5 or 6, 7, 10 years. But his whole idea, and there was another clip of where you want to be in a right-wing government. It's much better for gay people because they're going to keep Hamas out.
We have that here. You want to see?
Yeah, let's do that one.
By default, she'll end up defending the gays too. So you intersectional dingbats who are out there promoting for Hamas, who will kill you, it will be the far right that will save you. You will ultimately want to live in far right countries because largely they will basically be like, all right, you're gay, big goddamn deal, let's move on. So there's some hope, guys. So I think we had a nice round show for you. We came all the way around 360.
That's just not true.
Well, it's true in some countries that they are not promoting it like they used to, and Le Pen is definitely trying to sort of downplay the history of homophobia in her party. But there's a lot of far right countries where you don't want to be gay, and you know what? It's also when they've had a history of being homophobic, they can revert. If you look at Republican support for marriage equality, it has fallen below 50%. In other words, it went like this because they're finding it, we need this again. We need this homophobia again. That's where we're headed. It's so unbelievably blinkered what this guy's willing to say and do. Yeah. And to put his own family in jeopardy in some fashion. Now, of course, he believes that Elon Musk is going to take him and his family up to Mars on a spaceship, regardless of what happens. So he doesn't really care. He's articulated as much. But it's fascinating.
Dick Cheney was like this too. I mean, his daughter was a lesbian, and he was still, maybe not vocally supportive of his president trying to say that we should do a constitutional amendment to say marriage is between a man and a woman. He was still on that ticket because generally I think conservatives think yeah, you know, it may affect my family if they have someone who's gay in their family, but I'm wealthy and powerful enough that it really won't happen to me, and I want to use this kind of cynically for my own ends. He's just upset that Mélenchon wants to recognize a Palestinian state, and that's what's bumming him out.
The right wing is freaking out because the party that won, the Mélenchon's party, not only are they not anti-immigration, they are, we should grease the system and make it more efficient, which is what we've been saying. Somebody should elaborate that here, because they're like, the goodness of humanity, I think, will respond to that. And that they won saying that, and which is exactly what like the right wing has been saying. Look at all these Muslims coming in and they're destroying the culture and they're committing a suicide pact with immigration. And I'll just say, Le Pen has described being gay as both a biological anomaly as well as a personal choice, and said that pedophilia has its roots in the admiration of homosexuality.
And two things. One is that we're reminded by, I don't remember that. The other Biden says, did Dave not realize that Hamas is right wing? This is we
were talking about that before the show.
Religious fundamentals. But the other thing is that, like, when you talk about what are the fundamental principles of right, when he talks about, like, don't want our culture destroyed, I got news for him. I mean, he may have forgotten, but one of the linchpins of the right-wing culture is that a marriage between a man and a woman only, and that gay people begin to corrode the culture. They're just not around on that right now. They're not. It's also like, complaining about Dr. Seuss is not safe from the right wing either, just because they haven't cycled through it this cycle.
Right. They're on the immigration kick.
There is no right-wing country on earth. There is no right-wing party on earth that, given enough wins in what they supposedly set out to do, will not ultimately come back and revisit, even if they have said, we're not thinking about the gays so much anymore. They'll come back. It's just a question of the gays just got pushed a little further back in line before we tackle some of these other issues. But you're still in line. Make no mistake about it. You're still in line. Also, I would add, as a Jew, Dave Rubin's in line twice. Unbelievable. His friends won't have him to their wedding.
Well,
I was in Hungary, and all Orban's talking about is how he wants to make Hungary great again.
Let's be generous here, Sam. We don't really know that he has friends.
It's possible that Ben Shapiro was just like,
colleagues.
What are you talking about? We don't even hang out like that.
I'm going to have to tell you that it's because you're gay, and it's really just because I think you're an idiot. Unbelievable.
Oh, actually, before we move on topics, we have some fun clips of right-wingers taking the news here. I just want to play those real quick. Here is one set of young French right-wingers expectant of a victory being announced and then realizing that it's not, in fact, going to happen for them.
Allez. 3, 150.
Take a big old swing there.
I like how they did the countdown.
Trois.
Been there.
And just one more here with which includes both
split screen here.
Yeah. One guy celebrates until he realizes that it's not good news.
Oh, right. Oh, beautiful. That's nice. That was magic.
I mean, we need the equivalent now. It's time to capitalize on the we need conservative tears in the way that they sold those mugs that say liberal tears. At the very least,
I'll hold off on those.
All right, we have some Vergonia merch coming up, I guess, right?
Exactly. We'll just take some IMs and we'll get going. Jimmy Dore's thoughtful assessment. Do you think Biden feels a certain duty to Israel, and that is in large part or perhaps why he's refusing to leave the race at White House? No. I mean, I think he might, but that's not the reason why he doesn't want to leave the White House is because, I mean, look, I've been saying this for months. Try and tell someone in their late 80s or their mid 80s, sometimes even their late 70s, that they can't drive anymore.
Yep.
Dude, what's that dent in the back of your car? They're making the parking spots. They're too small now.
Yeah.
It's, it's everybody else's fault. Believe me.
Well, his family's got to step up. I mean, the Times is
His
just
family
reporting
is stepping up in the wrong way.
But the Times is reporting that a Parkinson's neurologist has visited the White House 8 times in the past 8 months. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't want to speculate.
That is a absolute time for your slide rule.
Maybe Matt felt it was in bad taste to do a slide effect for Parkinson's, but
in terms of my neurological capacity.
Oh, God.
I mean, if he has Parkinson's, it's something that we should probably have known.
I agree. I mean, yeah.
I know. Just because that a Parkinson's expert has gone there 8 times doesn't mean that he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's. It means that they may have questions as to, like, why is it at night he seems to be problematic? I mean, all of these things. But
concerning.
Johnny Casper, Sam's muffled. Iowa Ryan, if you need some good news, the feds are going after places in Iowa that broke federal child labor laws. Business owners probably regretting going with the governor on that one. There's big fines going out. Noah from Tampa. Just going to say, I don't normally watch. The fade in, fade out matte cam is such a nice touch. There you go. Dark Soul 9669. You may take our lives, but you'll never take our half jalapeno poppers after 10 p.m. I don't know what that means. Audio sounds fine on the app. Weird. Shabri. I got COVID for the 4th. Great Independence Day.
It's as American as it gets. What are you talking about?
That's an argument I've heard from them. Try and let gay people to vote for them. These foreigners hate you, gay people, more than we do. Come vote for us. Vermont Ben, can't wait to democracy to die because of a clerical disagreement. I think the only realistic option is Harris because of the campaign finance laws and how much money has been raised. Yeah, I agree. I saw a child covered in soot and blood today. She was in the rubble of a children's hospital that was hit with a cruise missile in Kyiv. Yeah. 12 people, I think, died in bombing in Kyiv. One hospital hit. Did not get that in the packet, but I heard that on the AP today. Both struck by this is happening. You don't hear people as concerned about it in some way. We've sort of like normalized that war that's gone on there. And B, like, it's news that children die in Kyiv in a way that it isn't quite in Palestine. And then he also adds, why don't you get a real job, you left-wing Limbaugh? That was... Oh, wow.
It's an old school
I forgot about that drop.
Yeah. No, it's in the...
Where is that in? The original...
I feel like it's in like one of the interstitial songs.
The original fun half, maybe.
Hey, Sam, I didn't see any mention of Jane McAlevy's passing in the quickie email. Any plan to run her interview as sort of a memorial? We're going to put together a playlist and we'll promote that. It'll be in the quickie tomorrow. I think we had produced the quickie before the word had come out, I think. Shart Ninja, it's time to take the keys away from Grandpa.
And username.
Biden is such a selfish man. Luke from Minnesota, he definitely meant to say good a job as I can instead of goodest, but that's not any better.
No, and he keeps saying on my, people were pointing out he always has this phrase, on my word as a Biden, and only I can do it. It's like, bro, I mean, you don't need to swear on your coat of arms to give us some confidence in the country. Just articulate something.
Finish a thought.
And it's so hard to make this case that Trump's this narcissist when all I heard in that Stephanopoulos interview was I, only me, I, only me. I mean, it really is.
Hey, Jack, I'm a very stable genius.
Unbelievable, his level of delusion.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to hide my contempt for his decision to be staying in right now, to be honest with you. Even Matt Iglesias is calling on him to step aside, one of his favorite writers, his other favorite writer, Thomas Friedman. We'll see.
The written word's dead, man.
Come on, Jack.
What did they say on Morning Joe today? Anything?
My new favorite program? They just were, Joe Scarborough was overcompensating for his debate reaction and talking over people, yelling at people, saying we got to get behind Biden.
And then the president is all like...
He was saying we got to get behind Biden?
I'm paraphrasing. I was half listening, so don't let... We'll check it out. Don't run to the bank with this.
All right. 3 more of these. Roger. The right is against everything Jesus said and did. They're not Christian. You should call them anti-Christ right. They are just racist. The fact that white nationalists vote in higher numbers proves they aren't Christian. They say that the election was stolen. If they aren't lying and believe that, they wouldn't bother voting. Glizzy McGuire. Emma, if you're going to cough, leave the room.
Leave the room.
Leave the room? First of all, this is one big room. I don't know what to tell you, but except for the bathroom. But
go to the commissary.
Yeah.
Is it me? In honor of Jane, who told strikers to leave their differences at the door, all non-GOP voters have to unite and vote D down the ticket. Anyone voting GOP for any position is anti-democracy. And the final I am of the day. Let's see here. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Biden 24. They're trying to take my car keys away.
Might win that landslide among the elderly vote.
Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job today. Folks, we'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah,